Welcome to Talking Points. My name is Dr. Stephen E. Gardner, and I'm here to bring you another discussion on the core values for faith and community leaders. Now, we've been at this for several weeks now, and we're pretty much coming to the end where we're going to conclude our topics regarding leadership. There's so many of them, and there's many theories out there that we have unpacked it in the weeks that we've been together. But today I want to talk about a very important aspect of leadership. I'm going to talk to you today about followers. And I'm going to talk to you about the various theories that are associated with followership. So let's get right into today's lesson that we have. When we define followership, it's very clear what I'm about to tell you. You cannot have leaders without followers. In fact, leadership is contingent upon influence. That is, every leader is influencing somebody. And those somebodies or individuals are called followers. For many people, being a follower and the process of followership has negative connotations. One reason is that people do not find followership as compelling as leadership. Leaders, rather than followers, seem to get the limelight. Leaders always seem to have the center stage. And clearly, you don't have to look very far to confirm what I just said. You can go to any media outlet or any social media platform, and you will find that leadership is sought after, celebrated, and even criticized. And if a follower is criticized, in many cases it's because they're struggling with the directives of the leader, or either they're rebelling against those directives. So today we're going to look at followers from a totally different perspective. And one of the ways we're going to look at it is that we're going to look at the shared relationship that exists between leaders and followers. So let's define leadership, or rather, let's define followership here. Followership is a process whereby an individual or individuals accept the influence of others. What's the purpose? To accomplish a common goal. So followership is a process whereby an individual or even a group of individuals accept the influence of others for the unique purpose of accomplishing a common goal. Followership has an ethical dimension. Like leadership, followership is not amoral. What I mean by that? It is not morally neutral. Followership carries with it a responsibility to consider the morality of one's actions and the rightness or wrongness of the outcomes of what a follower does. So there's a moral responsibility here, and there is a moral obligation associated with followership. Now, followers and leaders, they do work together to achieve common goals. And as I've already alluded to, that both of them share the moral obligation regarding those goals. The ethical consequences of followership pertain to the character and the behavior of followers and the impact that follower's behavior or character has on the organizational outcomes. Well, Followership can be divided up into two categories. One is called role-based, and the other one is called relational-based. And first, we want to discuss the role-based perspective regarding followership. So the role-based perspective, it focuses on followers in regard to their typical roles or behaviors they exhibit while occupying a formal or informal position within a hierarchical system. I guess one of the best ways we can look at that is a staff meeting. That when an individual, a follower is in a staff meeting and they come up with some good idea and they contribute and they're excited about it and they share it and it seems to be something plausible, then, that's an example of how that role that they have in an informal or formal position has a benefit to the organization. It's not a detriment, but it's a benefit. And I think in staff meetings that staff meetings are designed so that they can get input from those who are sitting there, employees or other staffers or other leaders, so that we can be better at the craft or better achieve the goals that are designed or that particular organization or group has. The emphasis in role-based approach is on the roles and styles of followers and how their behaviors affect the leader and organization. So you can go and at the very end of this presentation, you can go to this article by Bien and you can find out some more of what he had to contribute about the role-based and relational-based perspective on followership. Well, let's go to the next one. Let's look at the relational-based perspective. Now, the relational-based perspective to followership is quite different from the role-based approach. To understand the relational-based approach, it is helpful to understand social constructivism. Now, social constructivism is a sociological theory that argues that people create meaning about their reality as they interact with someone else. I guess one example would that be, for example, say you go to the gym and you sign up to have a fitness instructor to begin to target certain areas of your body or target certain things that you want to accomplish. And so that relationship then between the leadership coach and you as the person that signed up for it is a follower relationship. You've put them in the position of power. You want to follow them because you have a particular goal in mind. So that's an example of how the relationship-based approach works works within the concept of followership. Now, you may think when I say the word followership that this is a word that somebody just, that's something that I'm coining. Actually, the word followership is really talking about the theory associated with followers. And so that's what we're talking about here, all the theories that are associated with followers, and they just happen to call it followership. Now, according to the social constructivist perspective, followership is co-created by the leader and the follower in a given situation. As we just mentioned about the fitness instructor, that's that is a shared relationship. It is situational. It is based upon, in that case, what the leader wants, or what the leader can provide, and what the follower is accepting. The follower is open to receive the influence from that particular fitness instructor who happens to be in the role of the leader. So when we think about followership in this case, it is focused, guess what, on the interpersonal process and person's attempt to influence and the person's response to the influence attempts. Followership in this case is focused on the interpersonal process and one person's attempt to influence and the other person's response to the influence attempts. So, on our next slide here, we're going to look at these 4 typologies of followership. And this is adapted from Conceptualizing Followership in a Review of Literature by B. Crossman and J. Crossman in 2011. And so we're going to look at some of these things here, and hopefully they're enlightening, that it would leave you with a sense that, wow, there's a lot to know about followers. Just like we've been learning, there's a lot to know about leaders. And all of these concepts and ideas are theories that do help us to be better at followers and also better understand leaders as well. So let's look at some of these typologies of followership. Now, the first one is Zelznick. He mentioned this in 1975. And let me just talk briefly about his typology. Now, he was trained in the psychoanalytic theory. And these follower types are based on psychological concepts. In fact, he depicts follower responses to inner tensions regarding authority. So what he says, or these are tensions that are emerging from the inside of the follower. And these tensions, he asserts, may be unconscious, but can often come to surface and influence the communication between the leader and the follower, or that leadership or followership relationship. So the 4 things that Zelznick mentions is that he sees followers as either withdrawn, masochistic, compulsive, or impulsive. And many of us that are leaders probably have identified with an individual that may be withdrawn. There might be somebody in your church that might fit that bill. It might be somebody in your nonprofit that might fit that bill. Or if you are serving in the public service sector or even in the military, that you might even find someone that might be withdrawn. Some of that is part of the person's personality, but sometimes it's coming from a place to where they may be resisting what they're hearing, or they may not be in tune. Some people are masochistic or compulsive or impulsive. They just really, got their feelings out there, and they, whatever comes to mind, they do it. They don't really think about it. I'm going to do it. Impulsive. They don't give any thought to it, or compelled to do something that may not necessarily be in the best interest of the common good of the organization. So that's a little bit about Zelznick and his typology. And if you notice these dates here, that there's a transition here of progression from 1965 to all the way to 2008. Let's talk about the Kelly typology. Now, guess what? This is currently the most recognized followership typology that's out there. See, Kelly believes that followers are enormously valuable to organizations, and the power of followers often goes unrecognized. Isn't that true? That a follower often goes unrecognized. And I applaud those organizations and groups and even churches that really especially in volunteer type organizations, that really lift their volunteers up. They really make them feel special, because those volunteers and even other followers often go unrecognized. The only person that seems to be standing out is the person that's leading, the person that's out front, the person that's in charge. The buck stops with them, and so all of these followers are making them shine better. And I applaud leadership that looks to those followers and say, look, I couldn't be here if it wasn't for you. That's huge. So when Kelly talks about the in this typology, there are 4 types of followers that that he discusses here. Passive followers. And sometimes they are referred to as sheep. Kind of interesting to call a passive follower a sheep. That term is used pejoratively. And these are those who look to the leader for direction and motivation. Well, I think that, we that are pastors kind of want, we kind of want people to look to us for direction and motivation, but not to the point that I am enabling them. We have the Word of God, we want to share it. But if I'm in the process of enabling that individual and not empowering them, then maybe, maybe there's something else to be said about my style. But in this case, passive followers they look to the leader for direction and motivation. But then there's another category of followers that he refers to as conformist. These are yes people, brown nosers. These are people that are always on the leader's side, but they also still look for guidance and direction. Then you got alienated followers. Now, this group of followers, according to Kelly, are those who think for themselves and exhibit a lot of negative energy. They think for themselves and they exhibit a lot of negative energy. Then you have another group that's called pragmatists. And these are fence sitters who support the status quo but do not get on board until others do. Now, I kind of like that. They sit on the fence. They just kind of laid back, kind of see what everybody else do. And then when everybody else gets on the bandwagon, they jump on the board as well. They support the status quo, but do not get on board until they see somebody else do that. So you got 2 different types. You got the alienated followers. Those are ones that produce a lot of negative energy. But then you got the pragmatists who are fence sitters. And then there's another type of follower that Kelly outlines here, and they're called exemplary followers. They're sometimes called the star followers. These are those who are active and positive and offer independent, constructive criticism. They're active, positive, and they offer independent, constructive criticism. One thing that I think a lot of individuals do not like, whether you are as a manager or whether you are a leader or director is someone to give you some criticism that's not constructive, or someone to try to tell you what the problem is without offering a solution. Presentation is always important. And I think that one of the things that the followers need to know, that even if you have a beef or an issue with something, is how you present that to the person that's in charge. And sometimes there's a chain of command or a protocol or procedure that you go by. But if you just go off the cuff and all mad, even though you might be right in what you're pointing out, what you've done, you've shut down the leader-follower relationship. So sometimes we have to just really think about how we're going to share what's on our heart that might be bugging us, and then take thought in what's the best way to do that. Sometimes to be able to figure that out as a follower may be to maybe talk to someone that you trust, that's not that you can run it by. Say, look, I want to share this with my with my leader. I want to share this with my supervisor, whatever it might be. How do you think it sounds? And that's important. Presentation, in a lot of ways, can result in how a person interprets what you mean. They can take it positively or negatively. Well, let's look at another one of these typologies here. And that's Shaliff's typology. Now, he believes, rather than serving leaders, he argues that followers serve a common purpose. So he sees the leader and the follower serving what? The common purpose. And both the leader and the followers are working together to achieve these common outcomes. So that's a different way of looking at it. That the leader and the follower are serving a common purpose. And so he has 4 different styles of individuals that he identifies as followers. And one he identifies as resource. This is a person who does just enough to get by. Hello. I'm only going to do enough to get by. They're not going to go above and beyond the call of duty, but they're going to do just enough to get by. Or should I say, just enough to not get fired, or whatever the case it might be, or not get reprimanded. But then you have this other kind of follower, who's the individualist. Now, he's often marginalized by others. The individual speaks up and lets the leader know where he or she stands. So they don't just sit back, and just let anything happen. They and they're marginalized. Sometimes, I got to stay away from that person. This person always has an opinion. But they'll speak up. And they'll let the leader know where the leader stands and where or they'll let the leader know, rather, where he or she stands. And even the individualist, if you find yourself in that particular category, again, presentation is everything. How do you present? Think about what you're going to say. Not saying that you should not speak up for yourself, but do you want the message received? So sometime in order for your message to be received, it's how you deliver the message that needs to be heard. The next type of follower he identifies is the implementer. Now, this person is often valued by the leader because implementers are supportive and get the work done. But on the downside, they fail to challenge the leader's goals and values. So they'll implement, but on the downside, they'll fail to challenge the leader and their values. Are you saying that leaders need to be challenged? I say yes. That leaders should be challenged or should be open, to receiving input from followers that may challenge a way that they're doing something. Because I believe in organizations and groups that it's supposed to be a learning organization. And that each person, both the follower and the leader, should be aware that they are in an interdependent relationship. And so therefore, there is a give and take. There's an exchange that can occur. And it's these kind of organizations that have mastered this interdependency, that have seen huge success in their group and in their organization. And the people associated with those kind of organizations really feel good about supporting the cause or about being involved. But when it's only one way and not allowing any other way, then that becomes the type of organizational leader that kind of creates some of this negative input that you may see, or some of the distance that you may that may occur between followers and leaders, or some of the apathy. Well, I just don't care. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just here to get a paycheck. All of these attitudes can emerge from followers. But as a leader, we have a part to play. But today, we're talking about the part that followers have to play. And we're talking about the impact that they have upon the leader and also on the organization or group. The fourth type that Chalef talks about is partner. Now, this style of follower takes responsibility for him or herself and the leader and fully supports the leader, but is willing to challenge the leader when necessary. You know, sometimes we get things stuck in our head, and as a leader, we get things stuck in our head. It's got to be done this way. And there might be a better way of doing it. And sometimes, this partner, they come forward and they say, look, here is another way you can consider doing this. Maybe because they've had some experience at it. For example, if you have someone that has experience in IT and they are part of your team, I don't have any experience in IT. Who am I going to listen to, or who should I listen to that has expertise in those kind of procedures? I want to listen to that individual that fits this role as a partner, who's taking responsibility for him or herself and fully supports the leader, but is willing to challenge the leader when it's necessary. But then we come to the Kellerman typology. Now, she wrote a book, and I think I have that book here on my shelf. Yep, there it is right here. I got that book right here. And by Barbara Kellerman. And it says she's also how to followers are creating change and changing leaders. I recommend, if you want to understand something about followership, get a copy of this book. I got it listed on the last slide here. But let's look at let me give you a synopsis of what she believes to be important about this whole concept of followership. Now, she differentiates followers by levels. She sees followers as subordinates and having very little power, position of authority, and no special influence. And here are the 5 levels that she outlines right here in this book that talks about the kind of engagement that they have with leaders. The first type is called the isolates. They are completely unengaged. They are detached. They do not care about their leaders. Isolates who do nothing actually strengthen the influential potential of a leader. Let me say that. Isolates who do nothing. They actually strengthen the potential influential position that the leader has. For example, when an individual feels alienated from the political system and never votes, elected officials end up having more power and freedom to exert their will. That's why you should get out and vote. Otherwise, you are a follower as an isolate. Just saying. Bystanders. These are individuals who are observers, who do not participate. Especially in a group situation, the bystander is a person who listens to the discussion, but when it's time to make a decision, they disengage and declare neutrality. They're just a bystander. Some are innocent and some are not so innocent. The next type is a participant, and they are partially engaged. These individuals are willing to take a stand on issues, either supporting or opposing of the leader. So they're partially engaged. But here's the activists. They feel strongly about the leader's policies, and are determined to act on their own beliefs. They are considered change agents in our society. They feel strongly about the leader and the leader's policies, but guess what? They're determined to act on their own beliefs. I would think that we all should strive to be a change agent. In fact, that we all have the potential to change. We should just try to be that change before we try to change anyone else. Then you got diehards. man, they are engaged to the max. They're engaged to the extreme. They're deeply committed to supporting the leader or opposing leader. Diehards are totally dedicated to their cause, even willing to risk their lives for it. So, there are just some people that are just diehard. There's some people, and you've heard phrases that people have said, I've been like this all my life and I'm not going to change. Or they stand behind one particular party, and they're not going to change. They're not open. They just have tunnel vision. Well, you have some diehards that are followers, and they're going to support that leader or the opposing leader. They are totally dedicated to the cause, and sometimes that's just how they are. So, and to the point that may be willing to risk their lives for it. The only diehard that I know that was willing to risk their life, there are really two types. Number one, we find that it's typified in the life of Jesus. He was a diehard for the cause of his heavenly Father. So he died on the cross for us to forgive us that we could have eternal life. The other kind of diehard is when, you as an individual, you see this in the military where others have sacrificed their life or put their life in danger just to protect their friends. So there's some value to that. But the kind of diehards we're talking about here is that they support, they're deeply committed, and they're dedicated to the cause. And you need to have people like that on your team, but you don't want people following you blindly. You want people to at least have their eyes open and at least challenge you that maybe there's some things that you don't see. There's an angle that you haven't quite considered. That's the value that you can find in people that have very little power or authority or no special influence. That type of individual in an organization or group is a follower, which I believe is a wealth of resource that's around that particular that's in that organization that can help both leaders, managers, and the mission help move it toward a common goal and common success. Well, lastly, I want to talk about something that we all need to consider and think about, and followership and destructive leaders. And we all know that there have been examples of this that are out there in this life. Individuals that were destructive leaders, and yet, people, because of fear or because they fear they couldn't tell this person anything, or they fear that they might experience some sort of isolation, or whatever the case it might be, they follow a destructive leader. And we all have this need within ourselves to be validated, this need to feel special and important. And sometimes you have, bad groups out there, whether it be cults or whether they be, dictators or whatever the case it might be, or organizations that are toxic, that in essence makes it difficult, or that in essence takes advantage of followers. Let's look at this. There's another side of followership in which followers can play an unproductive and even a harmful role. For example, when followers are passive or submissive, their inaction can contribute to unfettered leadership, that is unbridled leadership, leadership that does exactly what it wants to do, doesn't care about anybody else. Their inaction can contribute to unfettered leadership and unintentionally support toxic leaders. Furthermore, followers can create contexts that are unhealthy and make it possible for leaders who are not interested in the common good to thrive. Let me say that again. Followers can create contexts that are unhealthy and make it possible for those kind of leaders who really do not have the common good or the best interest in mind. They enable that type of leader to thrive at what they want to do. When followers act in ways that contribute to the power of destructive leaders and their goals, which can have a debilitating impact, just guess what? That debilitating impact is not just on the organization or the group they serve, but guess what? It's on followers as well. So this is all I'm going to really say about, followership and destructive leaders. But followership does have this downside to it. When you have the blind leading the blind, or you have someone in a position you're in a position that's very toxic, and you don't see the values that we see from a positive, effective side of followership that's being displayed here. Well, that concludes our discussion today on followership. Here on this last slide are books and references, and I want to encourage you. Look, go look some of this stuff up. Go do your own research. Be like those who, in the Bible, it says these were more noble than those of Thessalonica, and that they searched the scriptures. Well, I'm saying search the references to see if what we're talking about is so. Because in the life we live as leaders and as followers, we need to have information that can inform our practice, information that can improve our lot, information that can contribute to the interdependency that exists between leaders and followers. Well, I trust you've been blessed today by this segment on followership. Come back again next week on Talking Points as we conclude our series on core values for faith and community leaders. God bless you. We'll talk to you then.